U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry calls for limits on warplanes flying over Syria. Is there a link between air pollution and Alzheimer's disease? And why are single men in Japan signing up for childcare classes? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, Syrian and Russian warplanes have reportedly mounted the heaviest airstrikes in months against rebel-held districts of the city of Aleppo overnight, defying U.S. calls for a halt to flights in order to salvage a now fragile ceasefire. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says if a ceasefire deal is to be salvaged, warplanes must stop flying over key parts of that country. His comments came Wednesday during a high-level meeting of the United Nations Security Council. More from VOA's Margaret Bashir.
The United States and Russia agreed to a cessation of hostilities on September 9th. But two deadly incidents since then have tested its viability.
So I believe that to restore credibility to the process, we must move forward to try to immediately ground all aircraft flying in those key areas in order to de-escalate the situation and give a chance for humanitarian assistance to flow unimpeded. And if that happens, there's a chance of giving credibility back to this process.
Kerry said a flight ban would also prevent the Syrian military attacking civilian targets with the excuse that it is going after armed groups and terrorists. The ban would also help build confidence toward restarting intra-Syrian talks.
How can people go sit at a table with a regime that bombs hospitals and drops chlorine gas again and again and again and again and again and again and acts with impunity? You're supposed to sit there and have happy talk in Geneva under those circumstances when you've signed up to a ceasefire and you don't adhere to it?
His Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, told the council that there are different versions of what happened to an aid convoy near Aleppo on Monday that resulted in 20 deaths.
We insist on a very thorough and impartial investigation of the attack on the humanitarian convoy.
Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson told reporters it is too soon to say conclusively who carried out the attack, but that there are strong indications it was Russia. Johnson said only Russia and Syria were flying in that area and that Britain has doubts that the Syrians are capable of flying at night.
Now, the Syrian crisis has, of course, dominated the UN General Assembly. For more from the UNGA, VOA's United Nations correspondent Margaret Bashir joins me live from New York. Hi, Margaret.
Hey, Vincent. So today, carrying again off that package we just saw, the International Support Group for Syria is meeting in about an hour's time. The ministers, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Lavrov, and other ministers in that group, just trying to see whether this ceasefire can be salvaged. The United Nations said today that some aid has gotten into one town, Muadamiyah, and that's one of the besieged towns that the UN has been trying to deliver to. They got food in for about 7,000 people, so aid is very, very slowly starting to roll out. The UN says it has 40 trucks full of supplies sitting on the border of Syria and Turkey waiting to come in, but they can't do it yet. They need particular permissions, and they need security concerns, security guarantees.
Now, if we may stay with Syria for a moment here, we started by saying that Syria and Russians have probably launched the biggest, bombing campaign there. Now, it's a little disturbing here. Kerry and Lavrov and other officials are there. Does it mean they're not really talking to each other about that? I mean, how is it that it's happening?
Well, I think it means they're frustrated with each other. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I mean, they're talking to each other militarily. They've been doing that for the whole year that the Russians, since the Russians joined militarily in Syria. So they do communicate with each other. I mean, they've never had an incident where the Russians or the U.S.-led coalition have attacked one another, for instance, or accidentally bombed one another when they've been in the skies. So they do have to be in touch with each other. But diplomatically is another story. And, maybe they're talking at each other, not to each other. I'm not quite sure what the problem is. But basically, as angry as Secretary Kerry was yesterday, I think it was clear that he was saying the cessation of hostilities is the only game in town, and we're going to have to figure it out.
Sure.
So whether we like each other or not, we're going to have to figure it out.
Yes. Now, another issue close to that region in the Middle East is, of course, the Palestinian-Israeli issue. President of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, spoke today. What did he have to say?
Yes, he made his speech, and he focused a lot on the Israeli settlements in Palestinian occupied lands. He said they're illegal, which most of the international community agrees with him on that. He said that they will come to the Security Council for a resolution on the settlements and on what he called terror by the settlers, because there's been a lot of violence between Israeli settlers and Palestinian citizens. So he said he will come to the council about it. That's no surprise, really. We've been hearing for several months in New York that there may be some sort of a Security Council effort before the end of this year, really before the end of the Obama administration is what it's about, to get a resolution on Palestine, either on the parameters for peace or on the settlements. And I think they've decided that settlements might be the easier road to go down, and perhaps the U.S. administration might be amenable to it.
Margaret, thank you very much, as always. We'll check with you again tomorrow. That's VOA's United Nations correspondent Margaret Bashir reporting live from New York. Now, President Barack Obama says he is committed to making Africa a booming, growing, thriving market, and that is because the continent is essential to U.S. products. Obama addressed the second U.S.-Africa Business Forum on the sidelines Wednesday of the United Nations General Assembly to promote trade and investment in Africa. Now, the forum began 2 years ago, and at that time, Obama announced billions of dollars in trade and investment in Africa. The president said the results can be seen today.
American investment in Africa is up 70%. U.S. exports to Africa have surged. Iconic companies, FedEx, Kellogg's, Google, are growing their presence on the continent. You can hail an Uber in Lagos or Kampala. In the 2 years since our last forum, American and African companies have concluded deals worth nearly $15 billion, which will support African development across the board, from manufacturing to healthcare to renewable energy.
Well, Obama said all that growth is only but a scratching on the surface of Africa's economic potential. He, however, stressed the importance of African nations promoting good governance that allows for good business. He cautioned that graft, cronyism and corruption scare off investment and stifles growth, adding that deals should start with a handshake, not a shakedown. Obama also pointed to the importance of developing infrastructure, as 2/3 of sub-Saharan Africa is without reliable electricity. Well, Egyptian rescue workers have found 9 more bodies in the Mediterranean Sea a day after a boat carrying hundreds of migrants capsized, bringing the death toll to, so far, 52. Egyptian authorities say they have arrested 4 crew members of the boat, which had been carrying almost 600 migrants. Now, the boat sank on Wednesday off Barj Rashid, a village in Egypt's northern Bahira province, where the Nile meets the Mediterranean. Rescue workers have so far saved 169 people, and it is feared the death toll could hit several hundred. The boat had been carrying Egyptian, Sudanese, Eritrean and Somali migrants. It was not immediately clear where the boat had been heading, though officials said they believed it was going to Italy. Well, a second night of violent protests broke out in Charlotte, North Carolina, Wednesday, following a controversial shooting in which an African-American man was killed a day earlier by a black police officer. And after another fatal police shooting earlier this week in Oklahoma, where a white officer killed an unarmed black man, law enforcement agencies are trying to find ways to reduce unnecessary violence during street encounters between police and citizens. VOA's Caroline Presutti has more.
Riots at night in Charlotte, North Carolina, after a black officer shoots a black man holding a gun. Protesters shut down a major highway. Others try to overturn a police car. 12 officers hurt. The family angry with Charlotte police over the death of Keith Lamont Scott.
They said, hands up. He got a gun. He got a gun. Pow, 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 pow.
The officers gave loud, clear, verbal commands to drop the weapon.
A 16-hour drive straight west to Tulsa, Oklahoma, after a white police officer shot an unarmed black man who kept walking toward his own car.
Full traffic. I've got a subject who won't show me his hands.
Video released by the police department shows Terrence Crutcher with his arms up. Crutcher and Scott are the latest of 706 people who have been shot dead by police so far this year. This Washington Post survey shows 173 were African American, 324 were white. With the increased spotlight on police actions, some departments are making changes. Virginia's largest police jurisdiction, Fairfax County, this week hired an auditor to monitor investigations into police use of force. We spoke with Board of Supervisors Chair Sharon Bulova via Skype.
We're providing some additional insurance to make sure that when an incident happens in Fairfax County, that we are really addressing things in an honest way.
After several shootings involving police, the Dallas, Texas Police Department increased training from once every 2 years to once every 2 months. Other departments require police to wear body cameras to increase transparency. The officer in the Charlotte shooting was not wearing one, but his fellow officers were. That closer video hasn't been released yet. This video, in the Oklahoma shooting, is from a dashboard camera. The Tulsa Police Department has a $600,000 grant for body cameras, but hasn't yet decided what type to buy. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Washington.
Ahead of the first presidential debate Monday, Republican and Democratic candidates continue to focus on swing states where the voter support is almost equally divided between the two. Now, Republican Donald Trump is campaigning in Pennsylvania Thursday, while Hillary Clinton's daughter Chelsea and her vice presidential nominee Tim Kaine are campaigning for the Democrats in Ohio, Michigan, and Nevada. Sladitsa Hoke reports the tight race is being closely watched at home and abroad.
Trump is seeking wider support from minorities and working-class Americans. At a rally in Toledo, Ohio, Wednesday, he said Clinton is a part of what he called the special interests monopoly in the nation's capital.
They all support the same ideology of globalism that makes them rich while shipping your jobs, your factories, and your wealth all the way out to other countries. I am not running to be president of the world. I'm running to be president of the United States, and that's what we're going to take care of.
Conservative British politician Nigel Farage says this message has helped Trump increase his support.
There are people in America who look at Washington, who look at the lobby and the power of big business, who look at the sort of detachment of a political class from them and their lives in a very similar way to how many of us saw Brussels in this referendum that we've just had.
Trump has vowed to undo some of the signature achievements of the Obama administration, such as renewed ties with the former communist foe Cuba. While it may get him the vote of some Cuban Americans, it is not a widely popular plan.
It's going to be terrible for the United States and Cuba. We've made so much progress. 2 million Americans have come here to visit Cuba in the last year. They've realized that these are great people. It's a beautiful country. It was tremendous potential for the United States economically.
A group of retired high-ranking military officers spoke out against Trump on Wednesday.
Donald Trump is not trustworthy. Number two, because he's not trustworthy, he's dangerous. And number three, we trust Hillary Clinton to be our commander-in-chief.
The Democratic presidential candidate was appealing to minority voters in Orlando, Florida on Wednesday.
I'm going to fight to give more Americans with disabilities the chance to work alongside those without disabilities.
Analysts say the upcoming presidential debates will be crucial in swaying undecided voters. Sladitsa Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to know what to think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, the possible link between air pollution and Alzheimer's disease. Stay with us.
science and technology, here's what's new.
It used to be called shock therapy, and it caused violent convulsions, leading sometimes to a temporary catatonic state. Now it's called electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. Psychiatrists at Georgia Regents University are using ECT to study brain stimulation and depression, and they say ECT is now safe with no resulting trauma. Electrodes are placed on the patient's scalp, and a finely controlled electric current is applied. This current causes a brief seizure in the brain. 66-year-old Keith says ECT works for him. He's bipolar, has post-traumatic stress disorder, and Parkinsonian syndrome.
I had terrible tics. ECT took the tics away. Terrible depression. ECT seems to be treating the depression. It's something I would never have considered 10 years ago, but it works very well for me.
Side effects of ECT may include temporary memory loss and short-term nausea, headache, or muscle ache. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grosshans.
Welcome back. Joining us now is Africa 54's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick, standing in for Lino Madu. What do you have for us today, Haiti?
Well, Vincent, the United Nations General Assembly has pledged to fight antimicrobial resistance. Health researchers hope this historic agreement reached in New York this week will slow down the spread of superbugs. Now, antimicrobial resistance occurs when antibiotics and other drugs used to fight infections lose their effectiveness. Resistance happens when microorganisms such as bacteria and viruses change when they're exposed to antibiotics and antivirals. These medicines then become ineffective and the infections stay in the body, increasing the risk of spreading to others. The UN declaration requires countries to come up with a 2-year plan to protect the potency of antibiotics. Countries need to come up with ways to monitor the use of antibiotics in medicine and agriculture, start curbing that use, and begin developing new antibiotics that work. The World Health Organization, the World Bank, and other UN agencies are set now to develop a plan of action and report back to the General Assembly in 2018. Well, a new study suggests a possible link between Alzheimer's disease and toxic particles found in air pollution. Researchers found the particles in samples of brain tissue, and it's opened up a new discussion about environmental risk factors for Alzheimer's. VOA's Lenore Madu has more.
Tiny magnetic particles from air pollution have, for the first time, been found lodged in human brains. Researchers use microscopic and spectroscopic analysis to find deadly magnetite particles, distinct-looking from those that form naturally in the brain. They say the discovery suggests a possible causal link between dirty air and Alzheimer's disease.
Seeing these particles with their very distinctive morphologies and size distributions tells you that they haven't been dissolved. You know, they look like they looked when they were in the atmosphere. And as well as being in the atmosphere, we see them in the brain. So you know, that's the novelty. Because magnetite is such a dangerous mineral for the brain, looking for and identifying magnetite in the human brain, that's why it's significant.
Magnetite is a magnetic toxic mineral long associated with neurodegenerative diseases. Tiny particles can enter the brain directly through the nose. Researchers analyzed samples of 37 individual brains from people living in air pollution hotspots, including Mexico City and Manchester. Although they do not claim a definite link between the particles and Alzheimer's, the team thinks future research on the possibility is essential.
If pollution-derived magnetite particles are a substantial causal link involved in neurodegenerative disease, that drives A, the individual level of trying to reduce their own exposure, but B, policymakers to try to do something to reduce the health burden. Alzheimer's disease may be a modern epidemic of our own making.
The World Health Organization estimates that about 47.5 million people globally suffer from forms of dementia, and Alzheimer's is by far the most common. WHO says every year, more than 3 million people worldwide die prematurely due to ambient air pollution. Lenore Madu, VOA News.
And that is our health report for today. Vincent, it's back to you.
Thanks a lot, Haiti. I don't go too far, right? I'll see you soon again. Now, the Economic Community of West African States has come up with a regional action plan on illicit drug trafficking. West Africa has become a major route for illegal drugs. Viewers Jeffrey Young has more on the new agreement and the impact on the region.
West Africa has been in recent years a major pathway for illicit drugs. There are also manufacturing labs in West Africa for methamphetamines and other drugs. All of it flows through this part of Africa because, according to drug policy analysts, conditions there enable such activity. One of them is International Drug Policy Consortium official Maria Coratiani, speaking to VOA via Skype.
You have very weak institutional structures. You have very weak border control. Patrol of our borders are very weak. Corruption is at its highest point. And so traffickers have seen these loopholes and they have decided to use West Africa as a transit zone to be able to carry drugs from Latin America to the western part of Africa.
West Africa's serious drug problem is being addressed head-on by ECOWAS. On September 5th, the group's interior and justice ministers approved a joint action plan to combat drug trafficking and manufacturing over the next 4 years. The states have agreed to step up arrests, drug seizures, and incarcerations. The plan also includes an emphasis on drug abuse prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation, which ECOWAS says, quote, are the most cost-effective means of reducing drug-related crime. The group's anti-drug plan is saluted by United Nations Office of Drug and Crime ECOWAS liaison Sheikh Touré via Skype from Abuja.
Mainly has this balanced approach in tackling the drug issues in the West African continent. So we are quite delighted to be partnering with ECOWAS in order to promote change and also bringing solution for West African member states.
One UNODC venture already underway that involves ECOWAS is the Container Control Program. The UN office says the massive volume of container traffic, more than 420 billion of them moving about worldwide each year, makes these shipping units attractive for smuggling illegal drugs. The UNODC says it works with governments to set up training at port facilities for what it calls risk-based profiling, identifying containers that may be hiding drugs. UNODC Sheikh Touré notes one of the recent payoffs of the Container Control Program.
In Ivory Coast, the law enforcement agencies of Ivory Coast, for the first time in their history, have claimed to seize close to 30 kilograms of cocaine in the containers. So basically, there are a lot of efforts into the containers programs to be made in West Africa.
While cooperation through multinational bodies, law enforcement, and focused attacks on drug cartels are deemed essential tools in addressing West Africa's drug problems, a number of NGOs say concentrating on these elements has not fully succeeded. One of them, via Skype, is the West Africa Drug Policy Network's Adeolu Ogarumbi in Abuja.
For so many years, the region, we've tried the use of repression, law enforcement, punitive measures to deter drug trafficking and drug consumption within the region. But this has actually not solved the problem. It has not reduced the quantity of drugs passing through the region.
Mr. Ogunrumbi and others say that what is needed along with laws and punishment is economic development that reduces the temptation for officials to take bribes and allow drugs to pass through, along with a holistic approach that addresses drug use as a health and education issue and not just a criminal matter. Without these changes, he says, drugs and the monies the drugs generate will not be suppressed. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Why are Japanese bachelors enrolling in baby care classes? We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Egypt, a boat carrying up to 450 migrants capsizes near Egypt's north coast, drowning 42 people. In central Johannesburg, police fire stun grenades and rubber bullets to disperse students protesting over planned increases in tuition fees. In the United States, protesters outside the United Nations called for Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe to step down. Finally, in Gabon, lawyers for President Ali Bongo and opposition leader Jean Ping say both parties have reached agreements on a vote recount from the contested August presidential election. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Diaper changes, feeding, bathing, all things that new parents need to know. Well, these men are not learning prenatal skills in order to help their wives. They're learning to take care of babies in order to get a wife. Classes like this are for men to become more appealing to potential life partners. They're taught all the basics of infant care, and they also learn how to communicate with potential spouses and talk about, wait for it, their feelings. Matchmaking agencies advertise these men as having, quote, extra value by letting potential partners know they will pitch in and help around the house. And I will believe it when I see it. Silicon Valley isn't just about the coolest new apps and platforms. Zoom Pizza is one of a growing number of tech firms and startups looking to shake up the food industry. Here, robots spread the sauce and put pizzas in the oven. The company will soon add robots to prep the dough, add cheese and toppings, take the pizza out of the oven, cut them into slices, and actually put them in the boxes. Zoom says its biggest innovation is yet to come, a delivery truck equipped with ovens to bake pizzas while they're on their way to the customer. The company also plans to shorten delivery times with software that can anticipate when and what kind of pizzas customers will order. And in other robot news, it's a new era in valet parking. This automated parking lot in Hollywood is the first municipally funded structure of its kind in the western United States. The local government claims it's already a great success. About 150 cars are now parked daily by high-tech robotic machines and computers. The goal is to build upwards and remove traditional car parks, which use up so much space. Once you leave your car on the ground floor, no humans are allowed into the building. The city claims there's no chance of someone hitting your car or of anyone stealing anything from your vehicle. Well, that is what is trending today.
And that's our show. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Here's a word you might have heard in medical stories.
Chemotherapy.
Until recently, the treatment all patients received was the same chemotherapy. Sometimes it helped, but sometimes it didn't. Researchers have been trying to come up with better treatments to shrink the tumors without affecting normal tissue or subjecting patients to the negative side effects of chemotherapy.
Chemotherapy is medicine used by doctors to fight cancer and some mental disorders.
Chemotherapy uses chemicals to kill cancer cells in a person's body. The chemicals sometimes are mixed in a liquid and injected into a person's blood.
Now, when you hear the word chemotherapy, you will know what this newsword means.